Hi, Professor. I just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up. I'm doing this video in a bit of a different way. Instead of more like an advertisement, I'm filming this in more of a briefing format, as if it were to be something that would be viewed in a situation room or something like that, where all the cabinet members and advisors would be sitting, and it's something they would watch, and it would be a bit more formal, a bit more straightforward, and less like a commercial in a sense. So I just wanted to give you a heads up, or to the GTF who might be grading it, or both of you, in case both of you look at it. Yeah, that's all. Hello everyone and welcome to a little video that I've put together for you to explain some inequalities in this country and what I think we can do to fix them. The topic I've settled on for you guys is gender, and gender inequality is by no means absent. It's a prevalent issue, and if I'm brutally honest, President-elect Trump has not particularly helped his own case with this issue. He's been a bit unclear on his stances, and I think if we can turn the tide, bring some clarity back into the mix, and help out with the opinions of the younger people and some of those on the Democratic side who really don't particularly agree with our views, then we might have a more unified country, which I'm sure everybody would like. I would like to begin by addressing that my ideas and suggestions are not bulletproof, they're not even particularly proven, but they do have the potential to work, and I've picked things that can be more or less easily implemented once the work is put in. So in this video I'm going to address two big points that I think are the most prevalent issues among the general gender topic. The first one is wage gap, and the second one is the LGBTQ community. We're going to start with wage gap. So we're going to start with 6 facts about wage gap inequality that are pretty important in my opinion. So the first one, in 2015, which was last year, women made 78 cents for every dollar earned by a man. That was a stat collected from the White House. For every dollar made by a father with children under the age of 18, mothers earned 74.7 cents. That was collected by the Department of Labor. African American women and Latina women would earn 64 cents and 56 cents, respectively, for every dollar earned by a Caucasian man. That was collected from the White House as well. And women currently hold 23 CEO positions, which is 4.6% out of all the S&P 500 companies, which was collected by an external source, Catalyst. And in 2018, there are expected to be about 1.4 million open technology jobs in the United States. And with the current rate of students graduating with degrees in computer science, only 61% of those openings will be filled, and only 29% will be filled by women, which is not equal at all. And 26% of people employed in the computer and mathematical occupations are women overall. Between the last two, 5 and 6, the percentages are very close. It's not only expected to be about the same even a few years from now, but it's expected to almost not change, which isn't good. So what's the one thing that stands out in all those facts I just gave you? Gaps. Big ones in some places, not so gigantic ones in others, but still there are gaps everywhere. Some of them are position related and some of them are wage related. Positions are a bit more difficult to change up by our actions, but wages is something that we can, activate some control over. So it starts with an executive order to raise women's pay, mandate to raise women's pay, basically, to meet those of men's pay where there are disparities, position by position. So say there is a cashier at a store somewhere, and a man will be getting paid $1, and the woman will be getting paid 74 cents. So we mandate that they get paid equally, position by position, obviously. So say if it was among the leadership, the two genders would get paid equally. In my opinion, if we implement this, I think that the drop in wage gap would be a good thing. It would involve some heavy data collection to see how exactly this would get implemented. I think that is something we could run through intrastate agencies and subsequently dealt with state by state and institution by institution. This is not something that can just be broadly applied immediately. It won't have proper effect. People will find loopholes. If we do it case by case, we will eventually work through the entire country's infrastructure, and kaboom, everything will be just fine. The reason I think the drop in wage gap will be helpful is has a couple points to it. So first of all, I think if this becomes a successful endeavor, everybody will be happy. I don't think men will be feeling worse that they're getting paid as equally as women. They shouldn't. I mean, if they do, then it's kind of, well, I don't know. That's not exactly nice of them. And I think it would increase the amount of women who would want to stay at a job, or increase the amount of women who would go actively looking to fill positions that might be open. They might be not particularly thinking they can get a job because they might be afraid that they won't get a certain position. And if we meet the pay accordingly, they might think, oh yeah, maybe I'll go try this out. And we can fill some of these positions where, fillings are really needed. There are companies that desperately need people on both sides of the gender spectrum, or all sides of the gender spectrum, to fill a position just so they can function properly. And one of the things I thought about while I was creating this idea was loopholes. Obviously, companies will exploit new rules to the best they can until just about everything is done and they can't do much more. To get a bit ahead of them, I had a couple ideas about that. So one of the things I thought about is, since all the wages will now be equal, companies will be having to pay out more money to their workers, which is a bigger expense to them. And they may try to break their old balance once the change is implemented to meet what it was originally. So they're not technically having to pay anymore. One way for them to avoid paying more is to start laying people off, whether it's laying off men or laying off women. Either they'll probably think about laying off some people, and they may try to do so without fair reason. I'm sure there are companies that do, and I'm sure there are a lot that also don't. But those who do, I think, should be subject to a monetary fine, basically, a monetary penalty. That is something that can be dealt with, I think, by the Department of Justice, depending on the scale of the layoff, whether it's, say, a bunch of people that they laid off. Say somebody lays off 50,000 workers because they decide, oh, we can't, afford to pay all this, or something like that. And if they, lay off 50,000 people without reason, that's not really fair, particularly. It might increase their profits and increase their retained earnings, but it doesn't particularly help anybody. And as far as what they lose from, this new strategy, if they start firing people, it's not exactly ethical. And eventually, I think somebody will find out. It'll be brought to light, and nobody will be particularly happy. So I think if this change gets implemented and, the wages are equalized, then they're going to kind of have to, force their own hand to follow through with it, because, people will start looking for companies that do immediately follow through and, immediately equalize pay in whatever ways they can. And people will start flocking to those companies. People will start wanting to work for them. People will work harder for those companies that, are ethically in the right place. And I think that if everybody tries to be a bit more ethical with their business, on top of being, businesslike and making good money and all those things that are good for the economy, if we add ethics into the mix, I think things internationally as well as intranationally will go quite well. So now on to topic number 2, which is the LGBTQ community. And this topic is another big one because this is something that is growing. The LGBTQ community is not exactly a new faceted thing. It's been around for a while, but only recently has it kind of come to explode in size and prevalence and importance also. Unfortunately, there's a lot of violence directed towards members of that community, openly in some places and quietly in others. Regardless, it's not good. LGBTQ people are twice as likely to be targeted as, say, African Americans, and the rate of hate crimes against them has surpassed that of crimes even against Jews. And that means, in short, LGBTQ people sit on top of the list of likelihood of being a victim for hate crimes. And a while ago, they were still not far from the top. They've always been near the top, but I think it's time in this day and age of progress to make a change and try to help them out, because the more secure they feel, the more secure I think the whole public can feel, because not everybody is comfortable with the idea of it. And the more safe that we can make everyone feel with accepting them and all those other parts that are included with it, the better off everyone will be. Now, this can be particularly tricky. Mr. Trump has not been very clear on his stance about this either. And if we can, again, clear up some confusion, add some clarity into the mix, I think it'll benefit everybody. Opinions will always slip over this issue, and the less we have to worry about it and the more good we do for it, the more energy we can divert to other areas, and the more energy that the LGBTQ people can divert to other areas of inequality that they are also facing. I mean, if we can improve their security or improve their financial areas, then they don't have to worry about that so much, and that can be kind of pushed to the back, and they can start focusing on other things, and maybe even do their own work along the side like they already are. One thought I had, which I think should definitely be implemented, is an increase in the punishment for hate crimes. Hate crimes is probably the I think it's up there on the list of how people discriminate against LGBTQ people. I would think the first is kind of your general verbal call-outs and other things that are not particularly violent. Non-violence normally sits above violence, but violence against LGBTQ people is not absent at all. And if we can increase the penalty for it, more people will likely, shy away from the thought of even considering being violent to someone like that. I mean, no one particularly wants to sit in jail. As nice as the jails are, nobody likes wasting their life away, whether you're fed or not. And the other thought I had is we can help by offering services to members of the LGBTQ community who either identify openly on some sort of census form or anything like that. If we can find a way to collect some data quietly and things like that, if we can implement some services to help them, say, find jobs at companies that do not discriminate in that way or will pay absolutely equally or something like that. If we can find them some employment and a way to secure their finances, great. The reason I say this is good is, well, it's twofold. First of all, they have a job, so they have something to occupy their time and hopefully a place that they can feel safe. And second of all, money. They can afford to face other disparities and discriminatory actions in other places. I mean, I'm not saying this is like a corrupted thing, but say your landlord is trying to charge you more because, well, he doesn't like LGBTQ people. If you have money, then you can start off by simply paying more, and then once the fight comes to it, you can work the pay back down to equal, and other things like that. With money, the more security you have with it, the better you feel in general. So there you have it. Those are the two biggest points on gender right now that I think are the most prevalent and the things that we can actually do something about. The options that we have, that I have presented for you, are not too far from reach. It's a good starting point for progress, and that is something that should hopefully be everlasting to some degree and extend past Mr. Trump's tenure in office. It's something that if everybody can kind of get behind, then as a nation, maybe even the government won't have to step in, and that's something that will just be done on its own. The more people that get behind, progress and positive change, the less work and effort we have to physically devote to it, and the more it can be left to its own devices to improve on its own. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found my advice useful.